Well, if you're ready, we'll begin. This is the 3-week competition between Islesburgh, Cambridge and Mearns. My name is Mike Hall and I live in Tiffins, which is 25 miles due west of Aberdeen. Perhaps I should explain my marking system. If the picture is a good club slide and I quite like it, I tend to give it 16 marks. If there's some slight problems or issues about it, then I would give it 15 or 14. Pictures which, in my mind, are arguably exhibition quality, I'll give 17 marks or more to. And then the top few, I'll give 18, 19 and 20. So let's get started then. The first picture is called A Barrel of Mischief. Here we've got a dog very happily sitting with a smile on its face, looking at the camera. So I like the humour in the picture. I'm happy with it being monochrome, and I like the fact the dog's sitting in the barrel. What I'm not quite so happy about is the fact that I find it a little bit cluttered, and the dog tends to merge with the background, which is a bit unfortunate. I've given A Barrel of Mischief 14 marks. The second picture is called Belvedere Session. Here we've got a group of musicians happily working away, concentrating on what they're doing and not looking at the audience or at the cameraman, which is great. It's in monochrome, which perhaps helps to stop us looking too much at all the detail in the background. Sure, there's a lot going on, but I'm happy with this because the overall picture tells the story very well and it's a great atmosphere. And I've given this one 20 marks and it is first equal. The third picture is called Budding Sailors, and I like the story here. Obviously we've got some youngsters on some sort of training course. I also like the fact that we've got repeating shapes, and this to my mind adds interest. Having said that, the overall picture is not that exciting, so I've given it 15 marks. The next picture is Common Frog. I like the fact that we can quite clearly see the frog with its spawn. There's nothing else to distract the picture, although there's a slight red line down the right hand side. I would have liked the picture to be sharper, however. I know that presumably somebody's getting in quite close, but there's no reason why you can't make it sharper overall. We can just about see the eyes clearly, and we can certainly see the frog spawn itself, but the frog spawn is not at all sharp. I think this picture could be improved by upping the contrast a bit. That would show the edges of all the eggs more clearly, even though it's not quite sharp. I've given this one 14 marks. The next one's called Competitive Edge. I like the fact it is bold and clear, and we've got these fantastic colours, and we can see there's some action going on. We've quite clearly got more than one rider, one behind the other, and to some extent this is a pity because it does actually distract in the sense that we can't quite clearly see how many drivers there are and where one stops and where another one starts. So competitive racing rather, gets 15 marks. The next one after that is called Covered Corner. I like photographs in monochrome, and this is fine, and I like the fact we've got fairly clearly the radiating spars, and this seems to add some interest to the overall picture. However, having said that, there's not a lot to the subject matter, and you've got to look very carefully. It's called Covered Corner. I suppose there is a corner of a building there. So not quite memorable enough for me, and I've given it 15 marks. The next one's called Dark Horse, and the interest here is in the texture of the horse and also the eye. Being monochrome is fine. The overall effect, however, is marred by the fact that just behind the horse's mane The background is slightly lighter than the rest of the background, presumably because somebody has adjusted lighting levels, but of course the whole horizontal bar of the grey isn't consistent. I've experimented with this picture and turned that grey back down to being paler, and also the small horizontal bar on the right hand side, which is quite dark, made that one paler as well, and that to my mind improves the picture because it saves taking the eye away from the eye of the horse. So interesting enough, but not as good as it could be. I've given that one 14 marks. Next one's called Dark Spiral, and yes, it is dark, and yes, it is a spiral stairway. I like some of the texture in the wall on the left hand side, and I like the overall dark vignetting effect on the left hand side. Having said that, the right hand side is terribly uninteresting, and I'm not too happy about this bar of light that seems to come from the bottom, centre bottom, up through the picture. So overall I find it a little confusing and a little disappointing. I've given that one 14 marks. The next one's called Ellie, which I particularly like. The effect of the lighting coming down from above, lighting just the fringe and then the face, gives the face a very three-dimensional effect, and you can see the skin tones as well, and this adds to the overall appeal. I also like the general demeanour of the model, and it's very peaceful and seductive, and I think that's a super picture, and given that 20 marks, so it is also first equal with Belvedere Sessions. The next picture is called End of Season, presumably because we've got the conker in the picture and something representing an oak leaf, an oak acorn rather, although presumably it's been turned on a lathe. I like the limited palette, the range of colours, and I like the texture on all of the various bits and pieces. So effectively this makes a rather nice three-dimensional still life, and I've given End of Season 16 marks. The next one is called Evie, and I've looked at this for quite a while, and I've discussed it with my wife as well, and we've decided that really we're not too happy with it. Yeah, it's nice to see a young kid, and I like the overall hair and effect, but I'm not totally happy with the sharpness of the picture. I find the hair, particularly on the right hand side, out of focus is distracting. And the colouring is unusual. It's neither monochrome, nor sepia, nor colour. So it's not totally satisfactory from my point of view. Also, I'm not too happy about the expression on the person's face. I'm sure that the kid's parents is very happy with it, but I'm not too sure that I am. So I've given that one 14 marks. The next picture is called Flyball, and I particularly like the action in this picture. Here we've got the dog happily horsing around and going towards the ball on the bottom right. There's a connection between ball bottom right and the dog two ways. One, because the dog's looking at the ball, and secondly because there's an orange piece of netting which seems to connect the two together, which is rather nice. I've experimented with this, and I'm going to suggest to you that if you just crop off a little bit off the left hand side and the top, it makes the dog bold in the picture space and seems to add to the overall picture. However, I like Flyball, and I gave it 16 marks. The next one's called Helping Nana, and I like the effect of all of the faces looking at the candle being blown out. What I'm not so happy about is the man at the background with his strange face, facial expression, and also the lighting behind the little boy on the left hand side. If you take your hand and crop off the top of the picture so that you cut out that light in the top of the boy on the left, then it tends, in my mind, to home in on what matters, and that matches the title better. However, as it is, I've given it 15 marks. The next one is called Here's Looking at You. We've got a relatively sharp picture, a close-up of a bird, and that's fine. I like the fact that there's no distraction around about it. It seems, to my mind, to be cropped a little bit too tightly. I would have liked a little bit more space towards the left of the beak and above the head. And I think a little more could be done to up the contrast to make the picture more punchy. So I've given that one 15 marks. The next one's called Heron, and you'll see that it's more punchy than the one before. I like the detail in the bird's wing and the fish going down the gullet. I'm a little bit unhappy about the fact that the neck of the bird is a little bit blown out, a little bit overexposed. So I think just cutting that down, and also cutting down a fraction the left-hand edge of the picture to take away some of the vertical bar, would just slightly add to it. However, as it is, it's a nice picture, and I'll be giving that 16 marks. The next one's called Hide, and yeah, I get the idea. The dog's hiding and being secured behind a rock, watching what's going on, and certainly looking directly at the camera and wondering what's going on. I quite like the detail in the face. It's a pleasant face, and that's fine. But behind it, the body is basically appears to me to be a white blob. I like the fact that behind the body, the area is dark, so that helps the dog stand out. But the dog's shape appears to be just a white blob, which I'm not totally happy with. So I've given that one, if I can find it. Hide gets 14 marks. Next one, we've got an abstract that's called Hung Out to Dry. I assume it's Arbroath Smokies. I like the colour of the skin, and I like the slight dash of blue down the centre, and the blue lighting that also comes on the skin. Gives the skin a feeling of it's some sort of snake skin. Yeah, I see it's being semi-abstract, but I'm not totally happy with the overall picture. I'm not quite sure where to look, and the texture of the skin is not quite as sharp as it could be. So in the end, I gave Hung Out to Dry abstract 14 marks. The next one's called Ice Creams and Summer Dreams. I like the fact that we've got chocolate drizzling down onto the ice cream, and the ice cream itself looks quite full of flavour and makes my mouth water. Having said that, the overall picture is quite dull. It's not as sharp as it could be, and it's not as contrasty as it could be. So overall, yeah, I know where to look, and I like the composition, but the overall effect doesn't quite work for me, so I've given that one 14 marks. The next one's called Jackson Lake, and I like the fact it's a clear landscape or waterscape, and you can clearly see all the boats, and there's a fantastic series of hills and mountains in the background. If you analyse this picture, you see the top horizontal third is mountains, and then below it there are two triangles, the one on the left being the boats and then one on the right being the water. So to my mind, the composition is a little bit out of balance, a little bit left hand heavy, and also the boats are so close together that you can't tell which one's which. It's the sort of thing that makes a very nice jigsaw puzzle, but overall, pictorially, I'm not totally happy with it, and I've given that one 15 marks. Now we've got one where the overall effect is very attractive. This is called Kid Stuff, and we can see we've got two kids wrapped in their own affairs. The little girl's looking at some candy floss, and the boy's got handing out some sort of bag of goodies. Perhaps it's at a wedding, because the girl's got a camera on her wrist, and the boy's got some sort of flowers in his lapel. So I suspect they're taking time out at a wedding, and this, to my mind, makes a nice story that's full of interest. From my point of view, I would like the picture to be a little sharper, and I would suggest if you cut the left third off the milk churn and the right hand third of the tub, you would home in more on the action, which is the kids enjoying themselves. However, a very attractive picture, and I've given that one, kids stuff, gets 16 marks. The next one's called Lifeline. It's appealing in a sense that a very dark picture, but with some light areas. So we've got good contrast, and we've got a very strong composition, and your eyes are taken straight into the picture and straight down to the lower centre. So the sort of thing you'd call an exhibition print. Interesting enough, and I've given that one 17 marks. Well, the next picture is called Long Black. Now here we've got two very strong triangles with a striking black and white motif. What I do like about this is that although there's a strong white area and the cup and saucer is white, we've got shades of grey in the cup and saucer, which helps to delineate them clearly. This picture stands out extremely strongly, and I'd say it's an exhibition print, and I'll give it 17 marks. The next picture is called Male Sparrowhawk, and what I like about this is the differential focus. So we've got the background clearly out of focus and not causing any distractions. Even the top area is slightly darker, which helps. The bird is just about sharp enough, and I would say it is very nearly an exhibition print. I like the way the cropping is done, so we've got enough space around the bird. But as I said, it's not quite sharp enough to be an exhibition print, and I gave Male Sparrowhawk 16 marks. The next one is called Me in My Paradise. I like the way the bird stands out against the background. We're seeing the bird in its natural habitat, so we've got mountains there as well. The bird is fairly sharp and quite well delineated. It's a pity that the bottom of the bird and its feet are hidden, are masked by the rocks. The other thing is, it looks to me as though the background has been lightened slightly, and there's a slight halo around the bird, a slight light halo around the bird, which I found distracting. So I gave Me in My Paradise 15 marks. The next one is called Mist on the Thames. I particularly like the S shape and the fact that the front boat is clear, and as you go further to the back of the boats it gets more and more misty. In fact, right in the top left hand corner you can see other boats totally obliterated, if you like, by the mist. So the effect is very three-dimensional, which I particularly like. I find this a very peaceful scene. A little gentle S shape appeals to me, and I gave that one 18 marks, and that is a third equal. Right, the next one is called Moonlight, and yeah, I can see the moon, I can see the light of the candle and the smoke. I like the smoke particularly. The candle I found to be slightly overexposed, which is a pity, and the overall effect is 3 pictures in one. I don't know whether it does 3 separate pictures or not, but that's how it appears to me. So it didn't quite work out for me. I'm not quite sure what it's all about, and I gave that 15 marks. Now we've got Moorhen. It's quite strongly lit from the side, which means it's three-dimensional. The lighting obviously is quite early in the morning or late at night, so we've got a distinct yellowish tinge. Do you like to leave it that way, or would you prefer to slightly blue the overall picture to make it look more like daylight? I don't know, that's up to you. It's slightly small in the picture space, but you could say, well, that's meant to be that way, so it shows the bird in its habitat. So, quite a nice picture of a bird. It's not quite sharp enough for me, and I gave it 15 marks. The next one is called Mountain Hare, Now hares are very popular at the moment in the Scottish Photographic Federation, and you'll see lots of pictures of them. This one is quite appealing because of the way that it's hunkering down into the environment and its ears are laid back, so it's quite appealing in its looks. It's not as sharp as I would like it to be. If the depth of field had been better, we would have had sharp ears as well as sharp nose. So this picture doesn't quite work as well as it could as others I've seen, and I gave that one 16 marks. The next picture is called Nagaru Hu at dusk, and I particularly like the sky, and I like the strong contrast in all of the stonework, so this gives a lot of detail which is quite attractive. But on close inspection you'll see that unfortunately the image has been over sharpened, and we've got slight light or dark edges to the cone-shaped mountain, which is a pity. So otherwise it's extremely attractive landscape, and I gave it 16 marks, but not quite exhibition quality. The next one I've got is called Rattray Head Lighthouse. Now you can choose to pick the picture sharp or soft focus, have differential focus, whatever. The author in this case has chosen to have a relatively soft focus throughout. I don't know how that's done, but the effect is quite appealing. It's a bit like an impressionistic oil painting. This quite appeals to me. I like the square format and the fact that the main subject is right in the middle, and it's nicely surrounded by the grasses at the bottom to make a complete picture, and there's perhaps a touch of vignetting at the top which works quite well. So this picture particularly appeals to me, and I gave it 18 marks, and it's third equal. Right, next picture is called Red Panda. I quite like the clarity of the image. We've got a light head against a black background, which works extremely well, and it doesn't appear to be over sharpened, just about sharp enough, and it is what it says it is, which is quite well done. I give it 16 marks. The next picture is called Shag and Chick, and I do like the way that the shag is looking to the right and the chick is enclosed by the mother's wing and looking to the left. That works extremely well. It's very appealing. The picture seems to be just about sharp enough, and we see a lot of detail in the feathers and the details in the nest. The only thing I admire in this picture is the fact that we've got quite a strong light area above the bird, which to my mind detracts and takes my eye away from the bird. So Shag and Chick gets 15 marks. Next picture is called Smoking Arrows. Unfortunately, I've seen a lot of these pictures and they all, to my mind, look much the same. So we've got the strong white against the blue background, which works very well. We can clearly see the formation of the plains and the fantastic curve of the smoke. So this is quite appealing and nice enough as far as it goes, and I gave that 16 marks. The next picture is called Snow Shower. I particularly like the fact that we've got a very dull grey day, and suddenly there's a very strong red umbrella and jacket, and this stands out very well against the background, particularly in, if you like, one of the thirds on the picture. The only thing I would prefer to do for this picture is cut the top quarter off and maybe a touch of the right hand side and zoom in slightly, and that would put the red in a strong position and cut out some of the areas at the top which I find slightly distracting. But nevertheless, I find this a very well done picture, and I gave it 17 marks. The next picture is called Soft Light, and this is another impressionistic image. Yes, it's not totally sharp, but it's very, as I said, impressionistic, and I would imagine it would be a fabulous subject for an oil painting. We've got a hint of colour. The apples are just about green and the background is slightly coloured. I like the way the feather leads you into the picture, and there's a slight upward angle on the bowl which seems to all match in very well, so it makes a very nice composition. This picture I found very appealing, and I gave 19 marks to, and it's second equal. Next picture is called Stormy Day at Dornholm. I like the feeling of the storm, I like the sea and the greyness at the top. Unfortunately, the greyness is a mixture of mist, rocks and waves, and the overall effect of the top two-thirds of the picture I find quite indistinct and unclear. So for that reason I've gave it 14 marks. Next picture, picture 37, is called Stromness Vo. I love the sky in this picture, and I love the way that the reflection copies or mimics the sky. To my mind, the horizon is just slightly below halfway up, and I would wonder about the positioning. If you get rid of the top third of the picture, to me it homes in, makes my eye home in more on what the subject's about. But you could say no rubbish. I like the fact that we've got the clouds shown twice. So a little bit unclear for me, but you might like it that way. I'm giving it 16 marks. The next picture is called Sunrise over Paratu Station. I particularly like the mist and the way the lighting comes from the side. The lighting on the bottom of the picture on the hills is gorgeous, and the way the top part of the picture is dissipating into the mist is also gorgeous. From my point of view, it seems to be two pictures in one. If you split it in half, you've got two pictures. The top half worked extremely well, and the bottom half works quite well. The bottom half isn't quite central and slightly out of balance. The top half on its own works extremely well. So from that point of view, I will give it 15 marks. The next picture is called Texture, and you can see why, because we've got very strong side lighting on the bollard and on the ropes, and also on the quay itself, and this works extremely well. The colours are bright, and I like the contrast between the blue of the water and the orange of the ropes. The only thing I'm not too happy about is the little triangle of black and top left, and I've tried playing about with some software and cloning a bit of blue water into the top left hand corner to get rid of that triangle, which to my mind improves it. I've given that one 16 marks. Next one is called The Dwelling Under the Hills. I particularly like the lighting on the valley on the right hand side, and the way that the trees are picked out three-dimensionally against the valley. When you look at the dwelling under the hills, I see two dwellings, one bottom right and a very strongly highlighted one in middle left because of it being light in colour. What would one like to change about that? I would either grey out the little building on the left, or preferably from my point of view, crop off the left hand quarter of the picture, and that to my mind makes the picture stronger. I like the fact that the building is quite small, so it's shown as being insignificant against the huge hills that it's nestling amongst and the sky above, so that works well for me. So I don't think you need to crop the top off to bring the building in closer. To my mind, as it is just fine, and I've given that one, Dwelling Under the Hills, 15 marks. Now this one's called The Beginning and the End. Yeah, I can see the point. We've got the eggs and the skull. Quite plainly, those eggs and that skull don't belong in that nest. So it's obviously a contrived picture, but it does tell a story. I get what the photographer's thinking about. Not strong enough from my point of view, and I'll give that one 14 marks. The next one is called The Fall, and like the second picture of the whole series, Belvedere Session, I'd like the strong black and white image, strong contrast and clarity. If you look at all of the spectators at the top, you can clearly see all of their expressions. They're concentrating very hard on what's going on. And then in the front you'll see the bull and the rider falling off. Only made slightly indistinct by the fact there's a very strong gate on the right hand side which takes my eye away from the main action. I wonder whether the solution is to leave the picture as it is and change the title, or to crop off the right hand side to get rid of the white gate, and then you concentrate on the fall. Take your pick. And I've given that one, if I can find it, 17 marks. I still think it's an exhibition picture. Right, this one's called Thirsty. Very peaceful. I do like the fact you can quite clearly see the animal, and there's not much wind, and one feels that it's not being disturbed doing what it's doing. It's not aware of us watching it, and this to my mind works extremely well. I like the way the trees are holding us into the picture, and I've given that one 19 marks, and it's second equal. The next picture is called 'Tis Season of Fog. In its own way it's quite gorgeous, very simple, purely monochromatic except for that red lamppost in the front right. To my mind the red lamppost makes it draws you into the picture. You look straight at that, your eye goes up and down over the various tops of the bridge into distance and brought back from the left hand side down to the bottom right and then up to the lamppost again. So the composition works extremely well, and this is an exhibition picture, and I gave it 17 marks. This picture, which is the last one, is called Tui Flight, and I had to research this bird because I thought surely it can't be that colour, but yes it can. It is iridescent, it is green, and to my mind it's an extremely unusual picture because it's not a bird I'm familiar with, but nevertheless I like the way the picture is sharp, and the cropping around the bird is just about right, and yet we've got some bright red flowers all around, but they don't distract from the fact you've got the very strong colouring in the bird itself. So this I would call an exhibition print, and I gave it 17 marks. Now that's all the pictures, and there's nothing more particular I want to say except I've provided a small file of half a dozen pictures that you gave me, and I've changed the cropping on them to change the emphasis, to show you what I was meaning when I talked about them earlier on. So you may want to have a look at these pictures. You might disagree with my point of view, but it's just purely my point of view. I hope you've enjoyed my judging, and I'll say good night, and I wish you a Happy New Year.
Thank you.